In color, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Roger Mudd in Washington, Marvin Kalb in Washington, Peter Kalischer in Helsinki, Finland, Frank Kearns in Rabat, Morocco, Bob Simon in Londonderry, Northern Ireland, Bill Stout in Los Angeles, Phil Jones in Fort Worth, Texas, and Gary Shepard in Benoit, South Vietnam.
Good evening. The House today almost unanimously passed the compromise tax bill and sent it to the anticipated passage by the Senate tonight. The most sweeping bill of its sort in decades, it provides tax exemption for more than 5 million very low-income Americans, tax reduction for more than 55 million taxpayers, and higher Social Security benefits for 25 million persons. The bill was one of the final pieces of legislation delaying adjournment. Roger Mudd reports.
The Congress today moved closer to adjournment, but at times the movement seemed almost imperceptible. The most easily understood action on the Hill today was the overwhelming vote of approval the House gave the tax bill, 381 to 2. The two dissenters were Republicans Ashbrook of Ohio and Landgrebe of Indiana. The Senate is now nearing a vote on final approval, with its passage expected momentarily. The tax legislation will then go to the White House, where President Nixon, according to his party leaders, is expected to sign the bill in about 10 days. But from this point on, the congressional story tonight is a confused and a confusing one. The House is now approaching a vote on a rider to a supplemental appropriations bill, a rider that would cripple President Nixon's so-called Philadelphia plan to open up the building construction unions in Philadelphia to non-white workers. Organized labor is generally opposed to the Philadelphia plan, and many liberal House Democrats, caught between conflicting loyalties to labor and civil rights, have also announced their opposition. Just a few moments ago, the House, on a standing tentative count, voted 125 to 83 against the so-called Philadelphia rider. But this must be nailed down by a later formal roll call vote. President Nixon is prepared to veto the supplemental bill if it still contains the Philadelphia plan rider. And a veto would in turn jeopardize the operations of HEW, of Labor, and of AID, the agencies whose temporary appropriations are covered in the supplemental bill. Late this afternoon, Senate Majority Leader Mansfield raised the possibility of keeping the Congress in technical session until January to prevent President Nixon from using his pocket veto on this disputed legislation. So no matter what you hear or see elsewhere in the country, there is precious little Christmas spirit on Capitol Hill tonight. Roger Mudd, CBS News, Washington.
It's just before the race. And they're off. The daily sprint at your house is on. Watch them go. Running all the way from breakfast to bedtime. Listen, you're the mother. It's your job to start them off right with one-a-day brand multiple vitamins every morning for all the vitamins they usually need to take if they don't always eat right. One-a-day vitamins for that big home stretch.
Les, well, you did it. How does it feel, Les?
Oh, Bill, great. Because every one of our guys are great.
Mom,
like old Vic here.
Great.
And the press was great, and our fans are the greatest.
Les, you got champagne all over you. How do you feel?
Great.
Ooh, Alka-Seltzer. Great. Yeah.
A spokesman for the Palestine Liberation Front said today that he expects the oil-rich Arab states to give at least $19 million a year to the struggle against Israel. The statement was made in Rabat, Morocco, where the 5th Arab Summit Conference is being held. We have a report from Frank Kearns on the summit's first session.
From the first open session, it has been apparent that this 5th Arab Summit will wind up not only anti-Israeli, but at times very anti-American. The very first speaker at this summit's first session was General Jafar Numeri from the Sudan, and his speech was anti-American, pro-Soviet from the beginning. Other Arab leaders in the whole Arab world heard the general describe America as our enemy, an enemy not content with furnishing money, arms, and equipment to Israel, but also selling Israel Phantom jet fighters and permitting Americans to be drafted into the Israeli army. These assembled Arab leaders often differ politically, some even personally, as virtual enemies. But all are expected to approve more money, more support for the Palestine commandos represented by Yasser Arafat, already emerging as a top personality at this conference. Behind the frustration, there's an increasing sense of impatience and urgency to step up the battle against Israel. Frank Kearns, CBS News, Rabat.
There also was anti-American feeling emerging from Israel today, as the Israeli cabinet rejected the latest U.S. Middle East peace proposals, calling them appeasement of the Arabs. The blast came in a communique issued after a 3-hour special session of the cabinet, in which the United States was accused of ignoring Israel's vital need for secure borders and peace treaties. In Washington, CBS News diplomatic correspondent Marvin Kalb takes a look at the reasons for the increasingly tense relations between Israel and the United States.
The administration wants to put some discernible distance between the United States and Israel, and by a concerted policy of making public speeches and leaking the texts of secret position papers to newsmen, it has succeeded. According to high officials, this is why the effort has been made. The administration felt that the U.S. position in the Middle East had badly deteriorated in the past year, so much so that American businessmen with heavy oil interests in this area began to complain directly to the White House. Among them, David Rockefeller, John McCloy, and Robert Anderson. In addition, White House and State Department officials believed that too close a public U.S. identification with Israel helped the Arab extremists and hurt the Arab moderates. To reverse this pattern and help the moderates in the Lebanon, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia, this close identification with Israel has been deliberately blurred. Finally, officials do not conceal their growing impatience with what they take to be Israel's stubborn insistence on face-to-face negotiations. If public pressure helps change this Israeli attitude, then the obvious risk of offending Israel and Jewish constituents in the United States was considered worth taking. There is another reason, too, for this U.S. decision to surface long-standing policy positions. The U.S. over the weekend leaked its new proposals on a possible Israeli-Jordanian deal, believing this would strengthen the hand of the moderates at the Arab summit meeting in Rabat and hold off the possibility of coordinated Arab action against Israel. It is not a happy situation for anyone, but the administration concluded that there was little political risk, to date anyway, in this apparent change in American attitude, and there was the admittedly slight possibility of breaking the diplomatic logjam with public candor. So this high-level decision to put distance between the U.S. and Israel. As one high official put it, this administration is determined to be right and fair on principle and take the political lumps if necessary. Marvin Kalb, CBS News, Washington.
A court in Switzerland today sentenced 3 Arab commandos, one a woman, to 12 years at hard labor for the attack on an Israeli airliner last February. The pilot of that plane was shot to death. An Israeli security agent who killed a 4th commando during the attack at Zurich airport was acquitted of murder charges. UN Secretary General U Thant said today that he expects the Big Four to be sufficiently in agreement on the Middle East problem by the end of next month for the UN to resume negotiating with Israel and the Arabs. Thant also told his traditional year-end news conference that the first step toward peace in Vietnam should be the setting up of a broad-based Saigon regime that could command the confidence of the people. In Vietnam, about 90 persons, including a dozen children, are feared dead in the crash landing of a crippled South Vietnamese airliner. The plane overshot a runway at Nha Trang and plowed into a shanty town, exploding in a kindergarten school. The plane was making an emergency landing after one of its 4 engines exploded in flight. Military police say most of the 70 passengers were killed, including 3 Americans, in one of the country's worst civilian air disasters. South Vietnam's President Thieu was in hot water with his National Assembly, and the temperature seems to be rising. The problem stems from Thieu's bold attempt to oust 3 legislators he considers pro-communist, an attempt which Thieu has taken to the streets. The latest such episode is reported by Gary Shepard.
South Vietnam's constitution gives every citizen here the right to take part in public protests. But since the country is officially under martial law, the freedom to demonstrate has been suspended by President Thieu. That's why this demonstration, by nearly 1,000 Roman Catholics, amounts to more than just a simple march down the street. Most of the adults taking part in this march are refugees from North Vietnam. They migrated to the South 15 years ago, when the country was officially divided as a result of the 1954 Geneva Accords. The demonstrators are demanding the removal of 3 deputies in the South Vietnamese House of Representatives who've been labeled pro-communist by the Thieu government. Effigies of all 3 were carried by the demonstrators as they made their way from the village of Ho Nai to the main square in Bien Hoa, 20 miles from Saigon. Others held signs and banners saying "Down with the coalition with the communists" and "Chop off the heads of the 3 deputies." Only a few weeks ago, President Thieu called the 3 deputies, being burned here in effigy, dogs, and asked the lower chamber to expel them. So far, that hasn't happened. And political observers here think Thieu made a mistake, allowing the Catholics to conduct 2 public protests in his behalf, while other political factions, like the Buddhists, are barred from demonstrating against the government.
Even supporters of President Thieu have criticized him for allowing Catholic anti-communist demonstrations one week and preventing a similar protest by the Buddhists another. It smacks of the old Diem regime, they say, and it's hardly democratic. But so far, President Thieu doesn't seem to be listening. Gary Shepard, CBS News, Bien Hoa, South Vietnam.
Today, a majority of the National Assembly signed a resolution saying Thieu has engaged in a provocative plot against the 3 House members, and that the plot has not only divided the government, but harmed the nation's fighting spirit. Some members called for Thieu's impeachment, and the Senate appointed a commission to investigate the alleged plot. North Vietnam has finally responded to plans of American families, to pleas of American families with loved ones missing in Vietnam. Xuan Thuy, Hanoi's chief negotiator in Paris, said today that his government is directly informing relatives of men captured. They said the list of captives would not be sent through official U.S. government channels because President Nixon, in his words, wished to cheat American public opinion. It has not yet been confirmed that any families have been notified.
My, this is some fancy place.
Nothing is too good for you. A wine with the dinner, sir? Morgan David Rosé. Morgan David Rosé? Very good, sir. Light and sweet. Very good, sir. Morgan David Rosé?
You name dropper.
Be a name dropper. Ask for Morgan David Rosé wine.
About 100 years ago, the cowboy and longhorn first traveled the Chisholm Trail. And when a man wanted a good smoke, he had to roll his own. Today, things are a little different.
Come to Marlboro country.
Russia and the United States passed an historic milestone in the Cold War today as diplomats at the preliminary arms limitation talks in Helsinki set the date and place for full-scale negotiations. CBS News correspondent Peter Kalischer reports.
This was the signing of the joint communique. Minister Gerard Smith for the United States, Minister V.S. Semyonov for the Soviet Union. A bland document that nevertheless affirms that an understanding was reached on the scope of the next round of SALT to begin April 16th in Vienna. At a later date, the conference will revert to Helsinki.
Do you think, sir, that these meetings, that these talks have come up to your expectations, the ones that you had before you began?
Yes, I think so. I'm quite satisfied with the work we've done here.
The talks will continue now in April in Vienna, and then it says in the communique will return to Helsinki at a later date. When will that be?
Well, this is hard to say. It depends on how long we'll work in Vienna, but I would think a matter of months at least.
Any surprises, sir?
No, I think everything went along well.
Wasn't that a surprise?
Well, it all depends on your point of view.
Have you got anything to say to the American people?
I think, says Mr. Semyonov, we have expressed together with Mr. Smith what concerns the American people in the communique we have agreed on today. That is, the best wishes of cooperation in the curbing of the strategic arms race. The task we just started here. That was on the record, and nobody is going to accuse Mr. Semyonov of being soft on Americans. But to the clink of champagne glasses, Mr. Smith is drinking orange juice, a warmer feeling prevails. For the past 5 weeks, American and Soviet negotiators made diplomatic history by socializing as never before. The Russians have been so easy to get along with, comparatively speaking, it has aroused suspicion in some quarters that they're up to something sinister. Could they delay a new American missile program, perhaps, by promoting the false hope that negotiations would be successful?
It was noticeable that Minister Semyonov was considerably more reserved in his views on the talks than Minister Smith. Nevertheless, it can be said that this most historic of disarmament conferences has got off to a good start. Both the United States and the Soviet Union appear anxious to get out of a poker game in which the ante is always raised and ends with a bang or bankruptcy. The crunch, however, comes in Vienna. Peter Kalischer, CBS News, Helsinki.
There was another slight thaw in the Cold War today as Poland accepted West Germany's offer to hold political talks. No date or place has been set for the talks, which will be the first between the two governments. The riot trial of Catholic civil rights leader Bernadette Devlin ended in Londonderry, Ireland today, and CBS Newsman Bob Simon reports.
Bernadette was convicted on 4 counts of incitement to riot and riotous behavior. She was sentenced to 6 months in jail and released on $600 bail. Her attorney, Sir Dingle Foote, said he plans to file an appeal immediately and is prepared to take it all the way to the House of Lords. For a week now, a battalion of British troops stood by as the magistrate's court examined the troubles of last August. The magistrate was a Protestant with a long career in unionist politics. After he announced the verdict, a group of Bernadette supporters expressed their sentiments. Attorney had argued that the Catholics were defending their homes against a police invasion, and that Bernadette merely urged the people to protect themselves. The prosecution maintained that the police were controlling a riot and that Bernadette was one of the principal rioters. It was a political trial, and everyone's attention was riveted on the consequences of any verdict. Put Bernadette in jail and look for trouble from the Catholics, acquit her and watch the Protestants. The feeling now is that Bernadette supporters will await the outcome of the appeal before taking any action. And however long the appeal takes, Bernadette Devlin's future will remain a very explosive question. Bob Simon, CBS News, Londonderry.
A grand jury in Chicago today indicted a Black Panther, Lance Bell, for murder in the November 13th gunfight which killed 2 policemen and a Panther. He also was accused of shooting at other policemen from an abandoned building. That incident occurred 3 weeks before the police raid on a Black Panthers headquarters, which killed 2 leaders of the militant organization. Robert Morgenthau, the New York federal prosecutor who had resisted White House efforts to oust him, today submitted his resignation. Morgenthau, a Democratic holdover, said he could not function effectively under the present conditions, that the situation has had a dramatic impact on the willingness of witnesses to come forward with vital evidence in investigations underway. President Nixon previously had announced a successor to Morgenthau, Whitney North Seymour Jr., a Republican lawyer. After a 2-day rally that closed last week's trading, the averages fell again on the New York Stock Exchange today. Volume was 12,700,000 shares. The New York index lost 37 cents. The American Exchange Index dropped 27 cents.
Kids say the darndest things, but they've got the right idea. I'm Art Linkletter, and we asked some experts, what would you like to give your mommy for Christmas?
The camera.
What kind of camera?
Kodak.
Why?
Because it's Kodak and it's a good camera.
Now, who would you take pictures of?
A girl in a bikini.
Why do people take pictures?
You take a picture of somebody when they're a little kid, right? And then when they grow up, you look at yourself and you know what you look like when you're a big kid.
Kodak Instamatic cameras are priced from less than $10, and they're a great gift. Jeff, if you got one, what's the first thing you'd do?
Take a picture of my other presents.
In Los Angeles today, that alleged leader of a hippie cult appeared in court with 2 girl followers to enter pleas in the murder of actress Sharon Tate and others. Bill Stout reports.
The girls, both 21, are Linda Kasabian, short and pregnant and white, and Leslie Van Houten. Mrs. Kasabian is accused in the Tate murders, the actress and 4 others, Miss Van Houten, in 2 killings the next day. 35-year-old Charles Manson is named in 7 counts of murder. He clutched some legal papers in his manacled hands. He wore a purple shirt, gold bell-bottom trousers, and an occasional smile. Miss Van Houten pleaded not guilty and was ordered to trial February 9th. Mrs. Kasabian wanted delay before pleading. Judge William Keene spent nearly an hour with Manson, who wants to defend himself with the help of 2 lawyers. Keene urged him to talk with an outside lawyer first. Manson agreed after saying, "The news media already have executed and buried me. There is no attorney in the world who can represent me." Outside court, a lawyer who knows Manson, whose partner is defending him.
Charlie Manson, from all that I've heard about him, from penitentiary officials and from everything that I've heard from reading his rap sheet, has never had on his rap sheet, as they call it, anything to do with violence. He's been about the most nonviolent person that I've ever had the privilege of meeting. He had the appearance of a sweet, wonderful, fine young man that everybody cared a great deal for and liked very much. I understand that at the various prisons where he was very popular with the inmates, and he was even popular with the guards.
Tragedy hit from the sky like winter lightning today at a naval air station near San Diego. The reporter is Ray Wilson of KFMB-TV.
A Navy Crusader jet crashed through a door into a hangar at the Miramar Naval Air Station today, killing at least a dozen persons, injuring many others, and damaging or destroying 11 aircraft. Most of the victims were Navy maintenance and repair crews working inside the hangar. The 27-year-old pilot, Lieutenant Cyrus Riddell of San Diego, had radioed he was losing oil pressure, and crash crews were already standing by as he approached the field. Riddell suddenly ejected safely from the aircraft. It then veered off the runway a quarter of a mile and crashed through the partially open hangar doors. The hangar went up in a flash of flames. Navy firefighters extinguished the blaze in 2 minutes. Then helicopters and ambulances began moving victims to the Naval Hospital. This is Ray Wilson in San Diego.
2 pilots were killed today in an F-111 jet crash at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. And for the 5th time in the last 20 months, the Air Force announced a temporary suspension in flights of the sweep wing airplane until the cause of the crash has been determined. The F-111 has been a center of dispute since it was first proposed by former Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara 7 years ago. Today's decision grounds 223 planes, $5.5 billion worth. The Army has temporarily suspended its plans to ship stockpiles of poison gas weapons from Okinawa to the West Coast for storage. Senator Warren Magnuson said today that the Pentagon has decided to review the entire matter. The shipments have been scheduled to begin next month, with the gas due to arrive at Bangor, Washington for movement by rail to storage at Umatilla, Oregon. Bill Terry apparently is going to be buried in Elmwood Cemetery after all. The young Negro soldier was killed in Vietnam last July. Before he died, he'd expressed a desire to be buried at Elmwood because it was near his childhood home in Birmingham, Alabama. But Elmwood is all white, and it refused to accept Bill Terry's body. Today, a federal judge in Birmingham said it must. 3 members of the famous Brinks robbery gang left prison today on parole in time for their first Christmas at home in 14 years. They were among the 11 men wearing Halloween masks who in January 1950 staged what was then history's biggest cash holdup, $1,200,000 at the Brinks Counting House in Boston. Freed today were Adolph Maffei, James Faherty, and Michael Gagan. 3 other members of the gang are still in jail, 4 are dead, and the one who turned state's evidence is still in hiding.
There's something exciting about this man. She likes being near him, close as she can.
There's something about an aqua.
Whatever he does, she's willing to try. Things seem more exciting when he's close by.
There's something about an aqua.
Give Aqua Velva for Christmas. Famous ice blue, cool frost lime, wild redwood, or the smart set with 4 fragrances. Make it Aqua Velva for Christmas.
Hurry and shave. It's time to open up the shop.
Take a minute.
Electric razor?
Sure. From Williams Electric Shave. Electric Shave makes my whiskers stand up. Lubricates my face. Close, comfortable shave. Feels barber close with Williams Electric Shave.
Barber close? It does. Quiet.
Everybody should look for the big L. First letter and... regular, menthol, and frost lime.
Blabbermouth.
The White House said today that President Nixon will announce the nation's space goals for the next decade sometime after Christmas. There have been reports that he would address the nation tomorrow on plans for manned space stations or a possible effort to put a man on Mars before the 1980s. Meanwhile, a man from the moon received a hometown welcome today. Phil Jones reports from Fort Worth, Texas.
100,000 persons were expected. 150,000 came to pay tribute to a hometown boy who made good by becoming the fourth man to walk on the moon. Alan Bean Day, by all measures, a Fort Worth record. For astronaut Bean, confetti was often more plentiful than moon dust and rocks found last month on the ocean of storms. 16 tons of confetti showered Apollo 12 space heroes Bean, Conrad, and Gordon. The astronauts later remarked, "We're always concerned that the people are friendly where we land. There was no such problem in Fort Worth today." Organizers had promised that this city would go into orbit for the astronauts, but no one had predicted such a hot time that the confetti would actually burn. For Mrs. Paula Peden of Fort Worth, the fire beneath her parade car was almost like being on the Apollo 12 launching pad with her brother Alan. Fortunately, flames were quickly doused, and Alan Bean hometown celebrations continued on schedule. Phil Jones, CBS News, Fort Worth, Texas.
And that's the way it is, Monday, December 22nd, 1969. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.